Good morning, everybody. I'm here with Cindy Briscoe. So we're going to talk today about a story, a practice that happened in Sudbury. And really what it was capturing, I guess, the strengths of a community and the culture of a community and trying to build sustainability into it. The situation in Sudbury goes back many, many years, and I'll go through that with you this morning. What you'll find from this is a story of perseverance of culture, of individuals, of corporations, of government, and of community together. Trying to restore a community in the perils of devastation of an ecosystem. So we'll move forward. I hope this is... Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Sudbury is a mining industry. And right now we're owned by a foreign country, so that's new to us. But the history of Sudbury goes back 125 years, and mining being the core industry in that community. What happened during that time period is that you'll see through these pictures is that although the community is rich in resources and nickel and ore, and it provided sustainability for an economy, it was a very short-term situation in terms of the impacts that it had. So the community, the people were dependent upon a one industry situation, which created perils when we got into economic downturns. And the impact of that industry on the environmental situation in Sudbury was profound. And what came from all that was lessons and things that don't need to be repeated again through history. So what we tried to do through this healthy, sustainable community approach was to build on the strengths and the leadership of the time so that we don't repeat history, and we learn from it, and we document it, and we formalize it into a way that will be sustainable. So I hope you can see this black rock. This was Sudbury back in 1979. So some 20 years ago, and this was the reputation of Sudbury. Moonscape, dark, barren, destroyed ecosystem, acid rain, everything that we had at the time was well documented and talked about throughout the country. The story on sustainability here is how corporations and people and government came together to repair the ecosystem. So this is 20 years ago, same picture, but it's green. And it's alive and it's well and it's working very, very, very soundly in our community. So this was rampant throughout Sudbury, and through the efforts of all these different groups, 9 million seedlings were planted, 50,000 shrubs. The soils were altered to break down the acidity, and the lakes, we have 300 lakes in Sudbury, the lakes were repaired. So beautiful stories. Here's another one, 20 years ago. Subdivision. The rocks were actually black, and you'll still find some black rocks in Sudbury. There's no question about that, but there's the difference today. So this is the environmental impact, but you can't just look at the environment here because it balanced all three factors. Economic, because the corporation was involved, Inco, was hugely behind this initiative. The community as a whole, we had social services people going and doing make-work programs and planting the seedlings. And we had government supporting it at all three levels. So where do we come in with this macro approach to a sustainable community? And I think, where do you start with that? I guess in terms of the holistic approach, Sudbury was doing very, very well as a community over the last 20 years and all the development you see here. But the worry from a city council perspective and an elected official perspective was sustainability. And as leaders change, systems change, influences change. And we try to work with council to build the momentum of the community in a very macro approach so that it would be sustainable. And I can't underestimate that because that is the true purpose behind this whole initiative you're going to see here. While individual silos were working well, while there were times under crisis when the groups worked together very well, it wasn't a natural state to be in. So back in 2004, City Council embarked upon this healthy community strategy. And it was something that failed many times before because we did try to do this a few times over, but this time it worked. And the story here is why it worked. And we actually went outside of our borders in Sudbury and we tried to bring in experts from other jurisdictions. So we worked with the World Health Organization and we worked with the United Nations because we had to create more interest because it had failed a couple times before. So we had to stop looking inward and start bringing in others to create the momentum and excitement. It did work, and we did balance the economic, social, and environmental factors for change, which were the priorities of both the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and also were the history of experience in Sudbury. That's where the success had been. We were able to capture that now into a strategy. And the strategy was released in 2005. And it wasn't shelved, and it wasn't put away, and it wasn't dusted. It was something that we actually lived and breathed every day. One of the ways in which we could do that was to introduce a healthy community charter. And that charter, we became something that the community as a whole could buy into and support and be a member of. So it built momentum. It also provided the direction on how to be sustainable. So it had the key ingredients in there, what it meant to be sustainable, what Sudbury had experienced, and what it needed to maintain as a community. And critical to this whole thing was identifying community champions. So we went back to those pillars again, the economic, environmental, and social pieces, but we added one more onto it, and that was active living and healthy lifestyle. And we went to our community and we looked for the champions in those areas. So we didn't want to reinvent any wheels here. We didn't want to break any bicycles that were working quite nicely. So we actually wanted to get the momentum going within the silos to work together. Because as silos, they worked very, very well. And we wanted to recreate the energy of synergy that occurred during a crisis, of an environmental crisis, but could actually bring the community forward to a higher level without crisis. So we took upon these 4 initiatives, and there were champions under each one of them. And I think you heard that from Winnipeg as well. You worked with the people that were strong in the areas. And I'll give you the example. So under social capital, we work with the Social Planning Council. Under economic growth, we work with the Greater Sudbury Development Corporation, which was tied into City Council. Under natural environment, we work with Earth Care. And under active living, we work with the health unit. So these were champions in their own rights. We were just trying to bring them together at a macro level. So as a result of all that, and in recognition of the great work that Sudbury had done, the United Nations actually designated Sudbury as a regional center of expertise for learning on sustainability. So we were quite pleased with that, and it really, I guess it met with the objective of bringing in the outside party, because we also got recognition for that at that level. So there are 4, I think, Cindy, in Canada, regional centers of expertise, and we're very pleased to be one of them. It actually gives us some accountability, and one of the prerequisites for this is measurement and indicators. So we don't have that perfected yet, obviously, but we're working on it. So, in terms of, I guess, the synergies and how we can keep these groups together, we, again, didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So we went back to the strategies that existed in each of the sectors, and we just monopolized them in the sense of we didn't need to do all kinds of studies. The studies were already done. So we had studies on social issues, economic issues, environmental, and health. But what we tried to do was tie them together so that all parties in the community, whether government, corporate, or citizens, could contribute to it. So these were the areas that we need to measure to show whether or not we have any impact on community health and sustainability. I think you've heard about poverty was one of your 80 tables you had. So we have 12, and poverty is one of them. Out-migration is an issue because we're a northern community, and it's hard to keep our talented people local. The impaired ecosystem obviously still needs work, which has come a long way, but it's not done yet. And under active living and healthy lifestyle, health status because of the impact on the ecosystem, and living in the north. So those are the examples of what we have to measure. When I talked earlier about the need for sustainability in a system, it was really about having to document and formalize how we're going to do this and maintain it and sustain it despite who's leading the ship. So the governance structure was introduced and implemented. Sorry, I'm walking back in front of you here. This is our governance structure. You have a flyer on your tables there that identifies all of this information. But this is the formalized governance structure for the City of Greater Sudbury. It started with an elected official body, which is the City Council. So it was transparent, accountable, and neutral. And what they did is they appointed a healthy community cabinet. Now you have to remember this thing started back in 2005, so we worked with experts back then, and then we reinvented the action stage into this particular Healthy Community Cabinet. So we have the institutions in Sudbury sitting at a table 4 times a year, and we appreciate that they won't contribute any more than that, but that's the commitment we have from them. So we have the president of the university, we have the 2 mining corporations, we have the health unit, the medical officer of health, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's the level of engagement at that period of time. And then we have the committees that are in pink or red underneath that blue box. And you'll see on there that one of the committees is research. And that research committee is made up of the cross-sectional partners in our community. And they're charged with the measurement on our 12 challenges in our community to see whether or not we can actually impact change through the initiative that we have with this Healthy Community Strategy. Okay. And I think this just re-emphasizes again that we work with community groups. We have grassroots organizations. There are 14 of them across our geographic area. So they're tied into this Healthy Sustainable Community Initiative. We have corporations and we have government. So we go from grassroots to corporate, and we're trying to instill behavioral change. One of the ways in which we're trying to do this is to celebrate what's happening already. So we're not, again, I can't repeat enough, we're not reinventing the wheel here. All we're doing is formalizing it and celebrating it. So we have created some lenses that are utilized by these committees to run initiatives, organizations, projects, or people through the lenses to see if they're adhering to the charter, the Healthy Community Charter, and to see whether or not they're contributing to improving the challenges we have in our community. Those 12 challenges being homelessness, poverty, literacy, et cetera, et cetera. So that sustainability lens creates engagement in our community and allows us to recognize organizations and others that are contributing so we can start to celebrate and empower others to be part of the whole process. Our philosophy is that if we build enough momentum, it's unstoppable. So that's the philosophy and the thinking behind this. Again, because we're trying to recognize the others, once a year we have an annual event where we actually celebrate and we provide awards to the different organizations and people that have met the challenges. One of the areas we're trying to build momentum for is social inclusion. And this is actually our arena, really simple approach, where we have 5,000 people coming out to watch the Sudbury Wolves play an OHL game. So by engaging others to come, trying to break down the barriers to inclusion, we can start to have people recognize that when they go to those games, they're actually contributing to the Healthy Sustainable Community Initiative. So this is the marketing strategy. So it says on there that I'm part of a healthy community, so it's behavioral. I support the home team. And this is the simplest of the simple in the sense of what we're trying to do to create momentum. This is an example of a boardwalk. This lake is situated right in the middle of our city, and we have a boardwalk that goes all the way around it. What we're trying to do is encourage the use of the outdoors, our natural pathways, and we're trying to create that active living, healthy lifestyle. So we have the marketing of I'm part of a healthy community. I enjoy walking. Pretty simple stuff, but we are anticipating it's going to impact change. This is, again, we're trying to instill, as a corporation at the City of Greater Sudbury, we're trying to instill free, accessible, barrier-free recreation. Very simple example again, fountain parks, water parks throughout our communities. And what's the message? I'm part of a healthy community. I enjoy fresh water. So these little lingo things I'm showing you here will be situated throughout our community in different places, particularly where they're attracted to start to build the messaging. Literacy is a big issue for Sudbury, and breaking down the barriers to literacy. Working with the 4 school boards, the directors of education actually sit on the cabinet, and they're trying to break down the barriers to literacy in their own rights, but we're also trying to do it as a community. So the propaganda, you want to call it, or the behavioral change, or the marketing, is I'm part of a healthy community, I love to read. The growth in Sudbury is an issue, out-migration of youth, and the population that we can attract is we have the only growth in our sector is in the First Nations population. and also for multiculturalism. Okay. So what we're trying to do is build that inclusion again and good practice, good, I guess, lifestyle and initiatives in that area. And here's an example where the Native community is tied into our cabinet. And that what they're trying to say is that I'm part of a healthy community. I walk the red road for health and success. This is what's meaningful to their group. And again, it's instilling that whole healthy community concept. This one here is how a community treats its vulnerable as a judge on the community. So the Samaritan Center, again, is a multi-sectoral approach to dealing with homelessness, shelters, soup kitchens, etc. And the messaging is, I'm part of a healthy community. I give to those in need. Support local charities. I think I have one more to show you. Two more. This is our university. And again, celebrating success, instilling achievements, building literacy, academic attainment. We have now have our, I guess the first medical school has been opened in Sudbury in the last 2 years, and that's the first one in 30 years in our province. So we're very proud of that. And again, it's about energy and macro development. So there's an example of our university who sits on the cabinet, and there's their marketing. I'm part of a healthy community. I'm pursuing higher education. Now, we've got two more still, sorry. Back to out-migration of youth. The Bohemian Index is a good measure of how well a community can retain its youth. So we need to pump up our arts and cultural sector. So here's our Sudbury Symphony Orchestra. Most people in Sudbury don't even know it exists, but it does exist. And so the marketing on that is, I'm part of a healthy community, I'm rich with arts and culture. So the more people see this, the more they want to be part of it. It's creating the behavioral change. This is the last one. So we all know that recycling contributes to better environmental management and giving back to community, etc. And so the marketing here, if you go into Sudbury right now, you'll see the city logo all over the garbage bins, all over the recycling bins and everywhere, which is really odd messaging. So we're replacing all of that with the concept here of, I'm part of a healthy community, I recycle. So that will be on the actual recycling bins that every home will have. So it starts to build that concept into everyday thinking. So that concludes our story. And I know the conference is around indicators, but this is really a story about how we got to the point of measuring the challenges of our community, how we have a research committee that's engaged from a cross-sectoral perspective, how they're working with our 12 challenges to impact how we can change behavior. So we're hoping in a few years we can prove that the action that's being taken will actually have had an impact on our challenges in our community. So.